Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason, Howell, and I have got quite a show for you. First, we talk with Dan Moren of Six Colors about 2 bits of Apple news. First, what's all that about Gatekeeper and servers and macOS slowing down? He explains. Then we talk about the change in commission, 15% instead of 30% cut for Apple with small businesses specifically. Then we talk to Bastone of The Information about Alphabet's Loon. That's the company that sends balloons up into the sky and provides internet for rural areas. Before we round things out with a conversation with Palmer Haasch of Insider to talk about Twitter's new fleets. And of course, our stories of the week. It's so much, so you gotta watch. Tune in now. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from TWiT's LastPass Studios. We know you're focused on security, but are your employees? Well, LastPass can ensure that they are by making access and authentication seamless, whether employees are working in the office or remotely. Visit lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 160, recorded Thursday, November 19th, 2020. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Stop letting people keep logs of what you do online and protect your online privacy with one click. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/TNW.
And by Melissa. Like expired milk, 30% of your customers' data goes bad every year. That's money down the drain. Visit Melissa's developer portal for free access to data quality APIs, demos, and code samples. Freshen up your sour data today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit.
And by Hover. Upgrade your domain to the perfect match. Millions of company names end with Inc. Now your domain name can too. Go to hover.com/twit to get 10% off your first purchase of any domain extension for the entire first year.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
I'm the other one, Jason Howell. How's it going, Mikah?
It's going well, Jason Howell. I am pumped about the show. We've got some great topics to cover today. And in fact, our first one is a dive into the land of Apple. Yes, I know Apple has been in the news a lot lately, but because of that, we've got to talk about it. And this one comes, I think it ends up touching perhaps a lot more people, affecting a lot more people than, specific to iPhone. Because Jason, you as an Android user, of course, don't use an iPhone, but you use a Mac, right?
Yeah. I've got a few Macs here actually in the house. So I'm kind of in that middle ground, I would say.
Yeah, so it was interesting. Now I can't remember when it was, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I remember I was using my Mac, and suddenly everything was moving very, very slowly. And so I'm clicking on stuff, and I can't make adjustments to my Google Sheets document. And I was doing something else, and I thought that the problem was Google Drive applications because they were all just moving so slowly. And so I, restarted my computer. I restarted the page, couldn't find anything. Inevitably, because my productivity had crashed, I ended up on Twitter and discovered that there was something else going on. And joining us today to talk about that something else is joining us from Six Colors, Dan Moren. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Hi, guys. Good to be here. I'm happy to explain anything related to Apple.
Well, we're glad. So let's talk about what this is. Basically, there was I know that there was a server outage, and I know it has something to do with Gatekeeper. So let's start there. Can you explain to our listeners what in the world Gatekeeper is, and then why would a server outage affect Gatekeeper and usability on macOS?
It does sound kind of ominous when you say gatekeeper, right? Summons images of like it was Ghostbusters, right? Are
Ghostbusters,
you the gatekeeper? Yeah. Well, so Gatekeeper is a system built into macOS. It's been there for many, many years. And essentially what this does is helps ensure the security of your Mac by making sure the applications that you're running are in fact the applications that they purport to be. So if you launch Microsoft Word or Safari or Twitter, whatever, it makes sure that the app that you're launching is actually that app. Now, it doesn't, I think, apply as much to apps launched from the Mac App Store. Those tend to be things where it's like, well, they've already checked them, right? They already are assuring the quality of the stuff in the Mac App Store. But stuff that's available outside the Mac App Store, obviously, there's not as many strictures on. And so Gatekeeper essentially is a system where every time the app is launched, it checks sort of a cryptographic seal on the app and makes sure that it matches up with what's in Apple's records, therefore proving that the app is intact and has not been tampered with or anything like that. It's gone through several progressions over the years in terms of how it does that. The most recent is a process called notarization, which essentially just, again, verifies that the developer who created the app and the app that's been that you're running are all above board and everything looks good.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it on my Mac, then when I launch Safari, it wants to make sure that that is indeed Safari from Apple and is not Safari that I downloaded from some email
Safari,
that was
the
like
Safari I sent you.
Exactly, not Dan's Safari. So yeah, that makes sense. Now, what led to this slowdown? That when I, tried to launch an app, it would seem to not work as quickly as I wanted it to. And what kind of, given that Gatekeeper is that system that's trying to protect you, yeah, I guess for anybody who's out there kind of going, okay, so what's the issue here? With a server outage, then this caused those slowdowns, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, it's the old problem of a single point of failure. There's a server that was supposed to be contacted. You launch the app. The app has its little cryptographic signature. It sends it out to Apple's server, and Apple checks it and says, okay, this looks right, and gets back to your computer and says, yeah, you're good. Run this app. Usually that happens in like split seconds. However, in this particular case, because the server went down, largely people think because it was inundated, it was a big update day for a lot of Apple OSs and stuff. So there was just a lot of traffic happening. Because the server then slowed down, the responses were essentially, basically timing out. So they were taking a long time to get back, that response back from Apple servers saying that app is okay. And so your app, meanwhile, if you were launching an app while this happened, it would just sit there sort of spinning because it's waiting to hear whether or not it's okay. And that can also just lead to sort of ongoing checks that are happening on your Mac for the security of applications, slowing down the rest of your services, the rest of your applications. It's not dissimilar from kind of when you're surfing the web, right? And you go to a website and you've got that little padlock that tells you that this site is what it's supposed to be. If there were a problem with sort of contacting the authority that verifies sites, integrity, that would slow everything else down. So that sometimes, that happens. For example, you load a site and you'll see that bar creep across there, and then it'll get stuck oftentimes because there are internet traffic problems somewhere along the way. So in this particular case, because that server went down, it caused these slowdowns. Now, it's important to note that the service doesn't work quite in the same way, for example, if you are not connected to the internet, right? Because obviously you think, well, I'm not connected to the internet. It can never check those applications. And that's not how the system works. When you're not connected to the internet, it doesn't run the checks in the same way. So as to make sure that when you're offline, you can still access your local applications. So ironically, people who were disconnected from the internet at that time had much better performance because it didn't need to run all those checks. But yeah, if you were online, that definitely caused a lot of consternation.
Yeah, there was a bit of a nerdy fix that I ended up implementing temporarily where you could, if you knew the site that was being used to do these integrity checks, then if you blocked it kind of at the router level. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then at that point, you didn't have that issue. But then you had to remember to re-enable it later, which is something that I forgot to do when I was installing Big Sur, which is Apple's new macOS. And so I had some trouble installing Big Sur and ended up remembering, oh, right, you were trying to fix a problem earlier. You need to kind of undo that. of course, so that was the first step. That was the first thing that was the issue. People were complaining, 1 point of failure, that's not great. And also we're having trouble getting access. But once they found out what the problem was, then they started to look at the way that Gatekeeper worked in this instance and had some concerns about privacy, because the fear that was there is that if I launch an app and Gatekeeper sends that off to the web to check and make sure that it is the actual app that I'm using, then if I'm not using a virtual private network or some other technology to kind of shield myself, my internet service provider then knows every single app I'm launching on my Mac. So they get more information about me that way. What is the response from Apple about this concern that suddenly there's some more profiling that's going on here because each of these activities that you do on your Mac are being sent off onto the web?
Right. Yeah. So first thing to keep in mind is that Apple has confirmed that the information that it's sending back and forth never includes either your Apple ID or the identity of your device, like the device's unique identifier. So that information is not in there. What it largely is a like you said, a cryptographic hash, essentially identifying the application and the IP address that it's originating from. Now, obviously, even in those cases, that's information that people might not want out there. And so hence some of these security concerns. Now, what Apple says is that going forward, it's going to make some changes to the way it does that. It's going to no longer log the IP addresses and will wipe any IP addresses that's already collected in its logs. And that it will start introducing some improvements to this, including a new encrypted protocol to check on these developer certificates. So rather than sending that information in the clear, where it can be intercepted by your ISP or by some other third party, it will send it on an encrypted connection that should keep it secure and keep that away from prying eyes.
Gotcha. Well, it's clear that Apple's got something in place and is planning on making some changes there to improve upon this technology and make sure that we don't have these slowdowns in the future. But there was another change that took place on the Apple front, and one that affects quite a few people, given our propensity to download third-party apps on our devices and the recent dispute between Fortnite and Apple and all the other stuff involved with antitrust concerns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Apple has announced that it is slashing the 30% commission from the App Store to 15%, with some caveats. So let us start with, before we get to the caveats, can you talk about what this commission is? What does it mean? Yeah. I create an app where you can just tap a button and a new photo of a chihuahua pops up, and I sell it in the App Store for $2.99, and I probably make a lot of money, but that's beside the point. What happens when someone buys that app and Apple's commission comes into play?
Right. Yeah. So like any store, Apple is taking a certain amount for its own percentage for its own, both to cover the operating costs and potentially to make some profit on it as well. So if you're selling your app on the store, you're going to get 70% currently of the proceeds of that app. So if you're paying you got your $2 app, that's what, $1.40 or so. 30% of the revenue then goes to Apple, in this case, 60 cents. And, again, that's supposed to be sort of the trade-off for, we've got the store infrastructure we've set up, we're handling payments, we're doing all this stuff for you, so that's sort of our cut. And obviously, there's been some dispute about how high that cut is. This is not uncommon. A lot of stores, Google's store takes a cut, Microsoft and PlayStation, if you want to distribute on their consoles, they take a cut as well. So in all of those cases, it's stuff that's generally considered to be covering the cost of operating the store. And that's been the case for a long time with Apple. It's done that all the way back to the iTunes store with music.
Gotcha. And now the change is in place, because there was, an argument that 30% is a lot. And Apple said 30% might be a lot, but this is our store. And then it's just been a back and forth and a back and forth.
Right. Right.
So what's changing, and what are the caveats with this new 15%?
Yeah, so under this new plan, which is aimed at small businesses, Apple is cutting the commission to 15% for stores, or for developers that have revenue under $1 million in a year. And so what essentially that means is if you're a small developer, maybe a 1 or 2 person shop, and you're writing your app, Mikah, you've got your Chihuahua app and it's just you and you're making some money, but maybe not $1 million. It means that your commission will only be 15%. So only half as much of that money will go to Apple when you sell an app. However, if you make over $1 million, that sort of jumps you back up into that 30% bracket for any like remaining amount. So like halfway through the year, at $1 million, now you're going to be back up to 30% in the amount that you end up paying. You can requalify. So there's like actually stipulations that you have to meet as far as Apple goes in order to hit that 15% lower bracket, which is mainly just to make sure that people aren't abusing the system, that you have like gigantic developers who are submitting under all these different names, for example. But you need to wait a year. That's the issue. And a lot of people have sort of taken criticisms about that, which is if you make $1 million last year and then that was a one-off and your revenue drops again, you're still stuck in that 30% bracket until the next year when you can requalify. That said, Apple has not released the final details of this program. It doesn't take effect starting until January 1st, and they said they're going to have more to share about it next month.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I think that's pretty good, especially given that, anyone who's a developer right now has already been existing in that 30%. So
right.
Any change for that should be a pretty good move. And as a maker of a calculator for, and actually a former guest on this show here, James Thompson, maker of pCalc, he pointed out that a 30% cut to a 15% cut means you'll make 20% more because math makes no sense and it makes little kids cry.
Numbers are weird.
Thank you so much, Dan Moren, for joining us here today. If folks want to follow you online, where do they go to do that?
You can go and find me on Twitter at dmoren. Obviously, I'm over at sixcolors.com, and I co-host the Clockwise podcast with Mikah every week on Wednesdays over at Relay FM.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
We'll talk to you soon. All right, coming up next, those internet balloons are falling on hard times. But first, this episode, actually, it's not a laughing matter. Anyone working on that team is not very happy about its state of condition. We're going to talk about that in a second. But this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ExpressVPN. What if I told you that every time you go online, your internet provider, whoever it is, maybe it's AT&T, maybe it's Comcast, they're allowed to store logs of every website that you visit, and they can legally sell that data to anyone. If I was to tell you that, I'd be telling you the truth. And that's why I always use ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN reroutes your internet connection through their secure servers, so your internet provider can't see or log what you do online. It's like a kind of like a hack around the service providers, so that you can do what you want online, and then they can't then go and sell that data and make money off of you again. How many of you might be wondering, well, if I'm routing all my data through a VPN, then doesn't that just mean that the VPN can see what I'm doing and then log my data instead there? And of course, everybody should be skeptical. You're right to think that, but many VPNs claim to have a no logs policy where they don't keep logging on their users. And then they've been caught logging customer activity after that. Well, ExpressVPN is the only VPN that I trust anyways, that we trust here at TWiT, because they use trusted server technology. They were the first major VPN provider to engineer all of their VPN servers to run in RAM. Now, this makes it impossible for their VPN servers to store any data, including, like I said, logs of any ExpressVPN customer. You don't have to take my or ExpressVPN's word for it. ExpressVPN's so confident in their no logs claim, they even had one of the biggest assurance firms, PwC, that's PricewaterhouseCoopers, audit their technology. It's no wonder that CNET and Wired named ExpressVPN the #1 VPN in the world. Like I said, I use ExpressVPN. I have it on my phone. I have it on my NVIDIA Shield TV because you can install it on Android TV. It's awesome. It goes everywhere. I have it on my my laptop here, my MacBook Pro. Stop letting people keep logs of what you do online. Visit expressvpn.com/TNW right now and find out how you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/TNW. expressvpn.com/TNW, and you'll learn more, and we thank them for their support of Tech News Weekly.
Thank you very much, ExpressVPN. So I don't know about you, but I certainly remember getting all excited about a certain company from Google, now Alphabet, that was planning on bringing internet to more people in a new way with its weather balloon-like devices called Loon. And Loon has been around for a while. I can remember reporting on it back when I worked at a company called Newsy, and it was kind of a newer idea at the time. But I haven't seen a whole lot about the company in a while until I came across this article on The Information from Nick Bastone about Loon kind of hitting some turbulence. So I am happy to say that we were able to get Nick with us on the show today. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Micah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. I mean, can you tell us kind of how long Loon has been around and sort of what the company's original goal was, and then if that goal has shifted over time?
Yeah, for sure. It's almost been a decade now, which seems crazy. But it started around 2011. And, the initial goal of, then CEO Larry Page and some of the early people involved was to connect the unconnected. So, to bring internet to people in places, mostly like rural countries and communities that, hadn't had access to the internet, partly because it's hard to bring terrestrial or like on ground means of internet to them. So yeah, the idea was to throw these or float these balloons up into the stratosphere and beam internet down to these people. And I think the goal was pretty grand early on. They wanted to basically reach rural communities around the world. And I think, what we kind of mentioned in our article is the economics have been tougher than I think expected. And also, they've run into some regulatory hurdles that have caused them to slow down a little bit. So, I think the goal is still similar to bring internet to these rural communities, but maybe it hasn't been as grand or as fast as they've hoped.
Yeah. So one of the things that makes Loon a little bit different is that and correct me if I'm wrong, but it still kind of exists as one of these experimental companies from Alphabet, right?
Yeah, it's considered an other bet, which is still part of Alphabet, but technically its own company.
Gotcha. Yeah. So is it akin to the moonshots that the company does?
Yeah, it came out of X, and it sort of graduated in 2018 to become its own company. And part of that is when you're your own company, like the expectations change a little bit. So. Where X is, sort of this idea incubator, you graduate and now you kind of have to prove yourself and prove that you're an actual business and you can make money. And I think, that's something that a lot of these other bets are struggling with. I mean, not only Loon, you have Waymo and Wing and some of like Verily, some of the life sciences companies. It's it hasn't been too impressive of how much revenue they've actually been able to bring the company. I think in the first 3 quarters, all of the other bets, not named Google, brought in $450 million in revenue, but cost the company almost $3 billion. So,
wow.
There hasn't been the financial return that I think, I think they knew these things are going to take a while, but I think they've hoped, 1 or 2 would have shown a little bit more financial promise at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's talk about the sort of financial issues, because when you've graduated and mom and dad send you out to the world and you're expected to make a job and maybe a name for yourself, those things change. And for a while, it seems that the company was kind of floating on Google money, but then found some outside investment from a SoftBank-owned company, and then has, as my understanding, that then that money might be dwindling, and so they're looking for another company to kind of raise some funding.
Yeah, totally. So this company, Haasch Mobile, which is a subsidiary actually of SoftBank, like you said, they invested $125 million into Loon last April. And so, part of our reporting was that that money from Haasch Mobile has actually run dry. It actually, we found that it ran out in August. And so what we've heard is that, basically since August, Alphabet has been floating Loon the money, but it's unclear sort of like how long that will last. And then we also heard as part of our reporting that, Loon is really, one of their main goals for this year was to raise another round, but that is, has been harder or is taking longer than they anticipated. So you have this tension between like, how long is Alphabet going to continue to fund Loon kind of solely, and, will Loon be able to find outside investment? There's sort of like an interesting example of where this went wrong with Makani, which was another bet of Alphabet's, and it also threw things up into the sky, but they were kites that harnessed energy, and we saw that they also got outside investment. I think it was from Shell, but they weren't able to kind of get another round of funding, and Alphabet decided not to keep investing in them because the path towards them becoming profitable just wasn't clear. So I think, sorry, that's a long way to say, like, I think the big question is, how long will Loon be able to last sort of in this like limbo state if it can't find funding? There's a little bit more history with Loon. Like, it was sort of a pet project of Larry Page. So it has a little bit more like company history than Makani had. And people that we talked to said that there's a little bit more hope that it can actually make money than Makani. But it's sort of an interesting parallel or example. And, hopefully it doesn't end up, with that fate.
In your time researching about Loon, and kind of, we've all kind of been following the Loon story for a while now, and it's like, I love the promise of this business, right? To be able to bring internet to people who couldn't get it otherwise. But then I see, the Loon effort kind of floundering right now. Potentially, at some point it might collapse entirely and go away the same way Makani did. Do you think is this a matter of competition? Like, are there others kind of, obviously maybe not floating internet balloons, but doing something that competes with this in a more of a cost-effective way? Or is this just an idea that's like expensive and untenable long-term?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the economics, it just seems like it's been really hard. And part of it is you're trying to bring internet to rural places that might not be the most lucrative markets. And so, Loon has a partnership in Kenya, for instance, and someone that we spoke to there said, that initiative at best will be break even for the company. And part of that is because the telecom companies in those areas just can't charge a ton of money to the people there. And so it's almost like, it's an amazing thing. You're bringing internet to these places, but it might not be the most, they might not be the most lucrative markets. And so it's interesting actually with what SpaceX is doing with Starlink. They're sending up satellites further up into the sky, actually into like a low Earth orbit scenario. And they have the same sort of idea of bringing internets to hard to reach places. But interestingly, it seems like the first markets that they're going to serve are in North America and Canada. So, maybe markets that, the customer is actually willing to pay a little bit more for the service. And we actually heard that from Loon as well, where or people that we spoke to that either work there or still work there, that could actually be a little bit, basically, if you could run these other markets at break even, and then make money in some of these other markets, like maybe that is sort of how the business operates. They've also said like some partnerships for their licensing their technology. That could also be like another, positive revenue stream for the company. But yeah, I don't know, like right now, as it stands, like from the operational costs to how much you're able to charge the actual customers, it seems like a really tough business. And, maybe something that, you get funding for, government funding for, I don't know. But yeah, it seems like the economics of it are tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we will be keeping a close eye on Loon. It just, again, given that sort of original idea that really does kind of, I don't know, it touches you a little bit, touches your heart a little bit. Like, yeah, let's bring internet to more people, rural areas, places where we can't get it,
right.
Especially when you consider internet a basic human right. So I want to thank you for keeping your eye on this situation. And if folks want to follow you online, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Twitter. I guess I don't tweet a ton, so I don't know if I'm the most exciting follow, but just at Nick Bastone on Twitter, and then just my articles through The Information.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Nick Bastone. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. See ya.
Alrighty, up next, Twitter has caught the stories bug. Oh dear. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. If you've ever forgotten to check the date on a carton of milk, you know it's not great. Like milk, your customer data goes bad. In fact, up to 30% of customer data goes bad each year. Melissa makes sure your data is accurate and current so you reach the right customers. Their tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for more than 35 years. Don't throw money down the drain with bad data. Verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, and names in real time with Melissa. Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for 240 plus countries and territories at the point of entry. This ensures that only valid billing and shipping addresses are captured and used in your systems. Identify your customers and get to know them. You can add consumer demographic information to your records, such as property and mortgage data, and even marital status or social media handles. Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or budget. With flexible on-premise web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options, you can choose the best way to meet your unique business needs. Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits to reinforce its commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. In fact, it has the utmost dedication to your data security by implementing strong controls and safeguards when processing your data. It's SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliance. Over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. And with the holiday season right around the corner, it is time to take control of your customer data. Trust Melissa to be your foundation for data-driven success. Melissa is supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19. See if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online. Don't put up with sour customer contact data. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit.
Thank you, Melissa. All right. If you have been using Twitter, particularly on mobile, because I don't think we have it on the web yet, at least I haven't noticed it on the web, just mobile. It rolled out a new feature this week. Everybody seems to have an opinion about it because it's kind of impossible to avoid. It's called Fleets, and Palmer Haasch, who's the digital culture reporter at Insider, joins us to talk about it. Welcome to the show, Palmer.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. I'm happy that you could take some time with us today. So thank you. And I was really I knew I wanted to get this story on today's show, but I wanted to find an interesting angle that isn't just, change is hard. I don't like it. I like it. Your article kind of got me really thinking about kind of maybe the potential downsides to this feature. But first, before we kind of go there, tell us a little bit about how this works. Fleets, what is it designed to do? How does it work? Are you enjoying it? What do you think?
Yeah, right. So Fleets are kind of Twitter's answer or response to the stories format that's taken over a lot of other social media platforms and was really pioneered by Snapchat. And so Fleets are essentially more ephemeral posts that only last for about 24 hours, and they appear at the top of your timeline from different mutuals, people that you follow on Twitter. And so they could be images, videos, reposts of your tweets or someone else's, or just text. And so basically they're short-term posts that don't necessarily, or they're not intended to have the same kind of permanence or public visibility as a tweet. So you can see fleets from people that you follow. They also appear on your profile. Someone can click on your profile picture and choose whether to view the photo or your set of fleets. And so that's essentially what the feature is. So if you are familiar with Instagram's stories or Snapchat's, fleets will be a very familiar format to you.
Yeah, it seems like they're all doing their own version of this. So it was really only a matter of time before Twitter got in on this as well. Twitter specifically called this a low pressure way for people to talk about what's happening. Low pressure. What is low pressure about this by comparison to what Twitter is all about? Is it the short life cycle of a fleet compared to a tweet that could last for as long as you like until you delete it? Is that why?
Yeah, I think that's a large part of it. And I also think the thing about fleets in particular is that it does feel a lot more insular than other types of posting. And so with a fleet, it's something that only your followers are going to automatically see. And it's not necessarily limited to only people who follow you, but they're the people of which for whom that content is going to be automatically displayed to. And it's something that you kind of it's not necessarily something that will show up on your timeline within the feed itself. Rather, you have to click on it and you have to find it. And so I think the ephemerality of it is a big part of it, but also the fact that it feels like even if it's not necessarily true, you might be posting to a sort of smaller audience. And so I think in that way, particularly in the ways that it's reminiscent of Instagram, it feels a little bit more personal. And of course, you don't have to worry that someone's going to necessarily publicly search for keywords and find your tweet that's outside of your normal circle. It's not quite as public in that way. And so I think that's a lot of it. And that's why it's a little less pressure. So personally, I tend to keep my Twitter somewhat professional, but for example, I'm really into K-pop. And so my first fleet was just a funny post about a K-pop artist that I really like that I might not have necessarily just put on my timeline. And so I think that's something that fleets have in terms of being perceived or marketed by Twitter as a low pressure posting option.
Yeah, it's like business in front, party in back. It's kind of like the mullet of social media.
Yeah, I like that. Fleets are the mullet of Twitter.
All right. So what you were talking about there, as far as this kind of this inability to really search into fleets, it's like they exist outside of the normal mechanisms of Twitter, seems to touch on what the crux of your article is at insider.com. You write about that lack of notification when someone's fleet or someone's tweet rather is fleeted. So many eats. How that could potentially at some point lead to becoming an effective tool for harassment. In other words, someone's tweet could be taken out of context or fleeted. That person whose tweet was fleeted would not know that it happened, and there could be a harassment conversation happening behind the scenes that they are completely unaware of. Am I summarizing that accurately? What does that look like?
Yeah. So essentially, one of the concerns that I saw people raising immediately when fleets started to roll out was that, for example, you can post your own fleet to your story, which is something that people do on Instagram with their own posts and things like that. But you can also fleet someone else's tweets. And so that looks like you go to their profile or you see the tweet on a timeline, and you can choose to just repost that onto, I guess, for lack of a better word, your fleet story. And so that was something that people raised concern about, because you don't receive a notification when someone fleets your tweet. And so in some cases that could potentially be harmless. It's kind of comparable to if someone, say, screenshotted your tweets and posted it as an image, you wouldn't know in that situation, or if someone quote retweeted it from a private account. But people kind of raised the alarm about this because they felt that if, for example, you are a smaller account and someone finds your tweet and reposts it to potentially thousands of followers and has a poor opinion, if you are a follower of that person with a larger following, you could click through, hit the original poster's tweet, and then find their account. And if there's a sudden influx of interactions or potentially derogatory comments, that could be something that would be largely invisible. You wouldn't know necessarily where it was coming from. And so what I saw was people raising concerns about brigading in that sort of scenario, when someone potentially would direct followers to harass a person or comment on a certain tweet. And the concern inherent in that is just that it's invisible and you wouldn't necessarily be able to notify the source. And Twitter did confirm to me in a statement that those notifications weren't present, but that they were something that Twitter was working on. So I think they are kind of aware potentially of some of those criticisms as well.
It's not like Twitter hasn't been in this situation a million times before. And, we've been trying to get them to learn that lesson repeatedly. Thankfully, they've improved things, but it's taken a lot of pain to get there before those changes. So I would be really surprised if they weren't at least, pressed up against this as a potential way of misuse of this feature. And hopefully they roll that out soon. How is this kind of stuff handled on other platforms? Because like we say, this is not a new feature necessarily. This is just Twitter's version of that kind of feature. Are other platforms doing things to prevent this type of kind of back channel harassment from happening? And how does that work?
As far as I know, I'm not super familiar with Instagram's terms of service, but I do know that, like, in terms of, I'm sure it goes against their terms of service or rules. But I think, like, the distinction there that people were talking about is there was one tweet from a user who was kind of addressing some of those, like, well, other platforms allow you to do this, why is it different in this case? And I think something that's inherent to any kind of social media user or anyone in the tech space looking at these kinds of, like, regulation and harassment, like Instagram and Twitter are very, very different platforms. And while harassment is inherent and present on Instagram, on Twitter, it's a bit of a different phenomenon. And so I think, like, a lot of these platforms, Twitter included, do, like, disavow this kind of behavior within their terms of service or their rules for users. But as far as I know, Instagram, on the same hand, also doesn't give the same kind of notification if someone reposts one of your posts on their story. And so as far as I know, those sorts of concerns haven't necessarily been raised in the same kind of, like, very quick fashion. And I think that's also because this has been, like, a longstanding feature on Instagram for a while. But I think, like, the growing sentiment among people who were tweeting about this yesterday was that Twitter is a radically different site. And has had such a storied history with harassment that it's been trying to address for years. And so other platforms allow the behavior, but I do think, or allow, not the harassment behavior, but allow you to repost other stories or other posts onto your stories. But Twitter is a platform where I think people feel that it should be taken with more caution.
Yeah, history has proven. And then as far as reporting something like this, if there is harassment happening within a fleet, like, is that just handled the same way using the same kind of harassment tools that Twitter already reports? Do they make that easy for someone to do?
Yeah, so I actually tested this yesterday. You can report a fleet, and any kinds of these behavior, whether it's targeted harassment, directing followers to go harass somebody, like that is all still prevented under Twitter's rules. And it is possible and fairly simple to be able to report a fleet. So in that way, it's very similar to objectionable content or content that violates Twitter's rules in normal tweets as well.
Right. Good. Okay. Well, then hopefully we see some more meaningful changes here. At the very least, I think what I fall back on is if someone is taking my tweet and making a comment on it on Twitter, I want to have the ability to kind of like see what those comments are. Like, I totally agree. Everybody can have different opinions on certain things, but when it comes down to a hidden active harassment strategy that's happening against a particular person, like if I'm the target of that, I definitely want to have the tools or the ability to be able to know that is happening, so that it's not hidden from me, so that there isn't like this war happening behind the scenes against me in a harassing process, in a harassment process. And that, so some sort of notification needs to be there. Kind of surprising that Twitter doesn't have it at launch, but I guess these companies are very used to launching products before they're 100% fully baked, or maybe they didn't think about this initially. I don't know. I find that kind of hard to believe.
I know. That's something that I think a lot of other people were expressing, because they were like, why would Twitter launch a feature that could potentially make the harassment that I receive on this website, not me personally, but generally that people receive on that on Twitter, so much worse? And I think that's really the crux of it. What you said is, obviously people are combative on Twitter already, and people can already amplify others' content to large audiences through quote retweets and things like that would already direct their followers to wherever it's coming from. But like you said, in that case, you do know where it's coming from and you can identify a source and hopefully mitigate it. But with fleets, that notification just isn't there.
Yeah, not yet anyways.
Not yet.
We'll be waiting for that to happen, hopefully sometime soon. Palmer Haasch, thank you so much for hopping on today and talking about your article. Great article. Everybody should go over and find your work on insider.com. If people want to follow you online, maybe they want to check out your fleet someday, where can they do so?
Yeah, if you'd like to find my fleets, you can find me on Twitter at Haasch, HAASCH_Palmer. Thanks so much for having me.
Right on. Thank you so much, Palmer. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. You as well.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Up next, Amazon Glass, or actually they're called Echo Frames, but same. They're about to ship apparently, and I can tell that Mikah is super excited about it. I know. Mikah can't wait to get those glasses on his face. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Hover. Have you struggled to find the domain that matches your business name? It can actually be pretty complicated. My wife has been doing this during the pandemic, shifting gears with her business, and trying to find the right domain was a discussion. It was a plan that we had to kind of go through. Now is your chance to upgrade to the perfect match. Millions of company names end with Inc. INC. Now your domain name can too. .inc is a new premium domain extension for businesses that want to be taken seriously. So whether you're looking to upgrade your business to the perfect match or be proactive with brand protection, there is a .inc domain for you. Now is your chance to own whatever your brand is, .inc. And if you've checked if your brand name is currently available for your purchase to the public, don't let someone else beat you to that, and especially with the .inc domain. Avoid the competition and high prices of purchasing a domain in the aftermarket. From small startups to large enterprises, brands are taking notice of the credibility of a .inc domain. Recently, Fluency Inc. upgraded their domain name from fluencyinc.co to fluency.inc. That makes way more sense. And Openly Inc. upgraded from openlyinsured.com to openly.inc. So you can see how it makes so much sense. Over 56% of Forbes' most valuable brands are registered, including PayPal, Facebook, Fox, Amazon, and Walmart. Hover has over 400 plus domain name extensions to choose from. They have powerful domain and email management tools that are intuitive and easy to use, whether you're a web pro or just getting started. No matter what you want to achieve, there's a domain name just for you. So you can get excellent technical support as well. They're available to answer any questions, and their support team doesn't upsell you. They only work hard to help you get online. It's kind of a fun experience, too, going online and searching out domains and finding the best combination. And when you can take your business name and put that Inc. at the end instead of embedded in the middle of your URL, like it just makes it's almost like you cracked the code, you solved the puzzle, and then everything makes a whole lot more sense. So check it out for yourself. They've got free Whois privacy protection, a clean and easy to navigate user experience and UI, monthly sales on popular top level domains. Your website needs to communicate the seriousness of your brand, and .inc does just that. So upgrade your domain to the perfect match. Grab .inc today with Hover. Go to hover.com/twit to get 10% off your first purchase of any domain extension for the entire first year. That's hover.com/twit for 10% off your domain extension for a full year. And we thank Hover for their continued support of Tech News Weekly and the TWiT network. You guys have been with the network for a very long time, and we do appreciate it. Thank you, Hover.
And thank Hover for supporting all of the domains that I own, which is too many. But where would I be without Hover? So not too terribly long ago, I did a review of for Hands on Tech, I did a review. Let's see, this is published September 2020, early September, of Amazon's Echo frames. These were a pair of glasses that offered the ability to communicate with Alexa anywhere you were. They connected with your phone and used your phone's connection to communicate with Alexa. They were also essentially a pair of Bluetooth headphones. These were part of Amazon's Day One Edition products. These are products that Amazon is sort of rolling out in beta, letting people try out, see if it's something that they should go further with, maybe not. And then from there, decide to make it a real product or not make it a real product. And apparently Echo frames did well in the trials because Amazon has since announced that they are releasing Echo frames as an actual product. So I purchased my pair of Echo frames, the Day One Edition models, for $179.99, so $180. And the actual model that's available for purchase is $250. Now, these glasses are essentially a pair of Bluetooth headphones. The upgraded version is going to have better audio, they say, better battery life, and it's going to come in a few more colors. So the original ones just came in black. This will have tortoise shell and I can't remember now. Oh, blue options. And they're also partnering with lens crafters so that you can get prescription lenses in them if you want to, a little bit easier. You could do it with the Day One Edition ones. You just had to take it to your optician, and they had a special bit of instructions for the optician to pop in your frames. But here's my problem with this. They're Bluetooth headphones, and they are not good Bluetooth headphones. And so $250 for a pair of Bluetooth headphones that aren't that great sounding is a lot of money. Even if the audio is improved, if we're basing it on the audio that existed in the Day One Edition ones, and we're going to go better than that, but only a little bit better, or maybe even a lot better than that, is still not great. Not $250 great. So unless someone is incredibly invested in Amazon's Alexa platform, I cannot in good conscience recommend this as a product that people should buy. That said, in my review of the Echo frames, I talked to someone who was very fond of the Echo frames and provided kind of a counterpoint to that. And so if your house is full of, ALEXA products and you are, in it to win it with those devices, then maybe you would be okay with these. But I just have to say, ultimately, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that this is becoming a real product. I did not expect that. And what's interesting is that folks with day one frames can upgrade to the new ones for $70, which is the price increase from the $180 to $250 price. So I would love to talk to the other beta users or day one edition users who checked out these frames and told Amazon, yes, more of these, please, because I'm shocked. Meanwhile, the other day one edition product I was not able to try out, unfortunately, because this one actually was kind of cool to me, was Amazon's Loop, Echo Loop, which was a little device that you wore on your finger. It was a ring, and you could talk to ALEXA into it, but it also offered some other stuff. It's got battery. It will vibrate so that you can get notifications. You can accept or reject calls with it. You can long press it to launch your smart assistant. And then there's like a button for speed dialing someone. So, again, not an incredible product, but to me more interesting, this little remote on your wrist or on your hand that you always have there, I think is fascinating versus a pair of bad sounding Bluetooth headphones. Sorry, Amazon, but I'm shocked. So yeah, those are going to be made, but the Echo Loop is discontinued.
I can't help but end up, in a similar place that I did as I was when I was going down the Google Glass rabbit hole, which is just kind of like, okay, like I guess I can understand why companies want to explore this. And I will also fully admit, when Google Glass first came out, I thought they were really cool. Like there was still a lot of like good kind of impressions by people, myself included, as far as like what this might be about the potential of like wearable smart devices. And yes, it looked funky and it was weird, but some of the features were actually incredibly useful. And so I liked it before I started not really liking it, before I realized there's only one real thing that I love these for, and that's the fact that when I record video, anyone on the other side of the video looks like they're looking at me. So it felt like I was recording a memory as opposed to just recording a video with a phone or whatever. So I was able to find that, but still that's not enough for Glass to survive, especially at the crazy cost. When I heard about these, it's kind of like, okay, so Glass is built around Alexa. We already kind of have Alexa everywhere. Does someone really need Alexa on their face all the time? Spoken from a person who does not have a single, I realize I'm firing off echoes, aren't I? Does not have a single one of those devices in my home. I'm a Google Home user. So, I guess to that end, I'm probably not the target market, but it seemed like a feature empty kind of device, or very specific to one thing, and that just didn't seem compelling enough to me. So I, like you, am kind of surprised that this is now being elevated to, a product that everybody can get on, that nobody's going to get on.
Yep, blows my mind.
We will see what happens. My story of the week is about YouTube. In the beginning, YouTube announced a change just yesterday, I think, that they are going to switch up how they handle ads on the platform. And I'm all for, companies getting paid. Ad content drives the content that we do here, or ad buys drive the content that we do here for people, on who follow TWiT. This is how you're able to get the shows for free. So I'm fully behind it. But the change that they've made is upsetting a lot of people. Essentially, before, they would allow people who were part of, the partner program. That's anyone with more than 4,000 total hours of watch time over a given year and more than 1,000 subscribers. Anyone that was part of the partner program, there would be ads played on that content. So Google/YouTube knew that there were plenty of eyeballs to be attracted to the ads on this content. But the flip side of that is that the people in the partner program would get a share of that, right? They would get a revenue share when those ads were displayed on their videos. And that's how people make a lot of money on YouTube. Well, now YouTube has created a new aspect of this that means that ads can appear on channels that are not part of the partner program, and those channels are not going to get a share of it. Now, mind you, if this is like a channel with like 300 views on a video, like what would that share be anyways? It would be minuscule, like it would be pennies, if penny, for a lot of these videos. But the point being that YouTube is basically saying we have the ad inventory now to make a whole lot more money by blanketing these ads across all of these videos that wouldn't have even qualified before because the view counts were so low. But now they're all, many of them are going to end up displaying ads to people who are watching. And that cumulative effect, I'm sure, adds up to a heck of a lot of money for YouTube, with the people creating the content not getting any chunk of it. And I don't know, it seems like people are very miffed as far as this is concerned. A lot of people in the YouTube community not liking the change, calling for this, putting this into the category of like, see, we really need to get this antitrust discussion fired up, or unionization, as another thing. So I just thought it was an interesting beginning of something, and I'm curious to see how it all plays out, or if, like often happens, we just kind of get used to it. I don't personally see ads on YouTube because I have YouTube Premium, and so that keeps the ads from playing, which in and of itself is pretty darn worth it, because if you watch a lot of YouTube, it's nice to not have to see those ads. But an interesting change, and definitely a big change for how YouTube handles monetization across the platform.
It seems like every time YouTube makes a change, it's not a good one. The company is full of missteps when it comes to respecting and appreciating its creators, which it would not be anything at all without them. It is literally a content hosting service. And so without the people creating the content, YouTube would not be a thing that it is. So it's always frustrating seeing mishandlings there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll see how that extends out. Still, as was before, ads will not be shown on topics like politics, religion, alcohol, gambling. They've learned a lot of lessons over the last 4 years, I think, as far as like ads ending up on the wrong type of content, or being advertising to kids, on kids' content, that sort of stuff. So some things are staying the same, but you might end up seeing just a few more ads on YouTube as a result of this. And if you do, and you wonder why, now you know. There you go.
There you go.
All right,
now
we've reached the more you know. We've reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. We publish every Thursday this podcast to twit.tv/TNW. Go there and you can find the many ways to subscribe to this show. You can also jump out to YouTube and subscribe in audio and video formats. We don't care how you subscribe, just as long as you do. So check it out.
Amen. And of course, you can follow us on social media. We are at TWiT on Twitter. I don't think we're currently fleeting, but that may be a fleeting decision. We're at twit.tv on Instagram and at Twit Talk on TikTok. I'm at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks, so you can find me there if you'd like. But also, please do check out Hands on iOS. That's twit.tv/HOI. I'll have an episode out later today that walks you through the new addition in iOS 14 called the App Library. If you are coming from Android or have ever used Android, it will be familiar to you as that nice drawer of all of your apps listed alphabetically. So that's App Library in iOS 14. What about you, Jason?
Nice. I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. Haven't fleeted yet, but I'm considering, I've got a fleet kind of beating around in my head right now, so I might do that.
Fleet beat?
Yeah, exactly. You'll see. When I get the materials, it's too complicated of an idea now that I think about it, but it would be great if I could pull it off. So we'll see. Anyways, at Jason Howell on Twitter if you want to see if I actually follow through on that. Twit.tv/HOA for hands on Android. This week's episode just went up this morning. I took a look at the accessibility features of Android and pulled out some features that are really, at the end of the day, handy for everyone. Like they're useful for anyone that wants to use them. Accessibility features obviously are created for a very specific purpose, but sometimes they have uses outside of that purpose. And so I do a little focus on that so you can take a closer look at the accessibility features on your Android device. Big thanks to everybody who helps us do the show each and every week. Of course, Burke at the studio, John Ashley pushing the buttons and editing and turning this around so y'all can see it a little bit later on this afternoon. And we couldn't do this show without you. So thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Want more Twit? Well, check out Smart Tech Today. It's at twit.tv/STT. It's the show where Matthew Casanelli and I cover everything there is to know about smart tech. It's automation, it's connected devices, it's smart home, it's all those goodies and so much more. We get the news, we get the latest devices, we do reviews, everything. You got to check it out, twit.tv/STT for Smart Tech Today.